In Flanders Fields the poppies blow between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place. And in the sky the larks, still bravely singing, fly scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved. And now we lie in Flanders Fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you from failing hands we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders Fields. On Memorial Day, we are called to honor the fallen in war, the lost, reflecting on their stories and remembering their sacrifices. Landscapes, cultures, and attitudes, personal and professional, are unwillingly transformed in war. In this third episode of 21 Ways, we will go beyond the numbers and explore stories during times of war as told by the living and the lost. While casualty statistics offer an incomplete picture of the effects of war, they provide a grim foundation for realizing the impact of war worldwide. Let us consider the two world wars of the 20th century and draw comparisons to other statistics. It is estimated that 20 million lost their lives in World War I. That equivalent, when considering world population today, would be over 85 million. The death toll of the Second World War is estimated around 85 million, which today would be over 288 million, or 3.7% of the world's population. As pandemic is a present reality in our world today, a comparison of wartime deaths and pandemic-related deaths provide context on the destructive impact of war. The current COVID-19 pandemic has resulted in 3.5 million deaths worldwide, according to the World Health Organization. The 1918 influenza pandemic claimed the lives of 50 million people, which in today's world population equivalent would be just over 218 million. As further comparison on the historical impact of war, here are all statistics presented so far against the deadly Mongolian Empire conquest of the mid-13th century, where an estimated 40 to 60 million lives were lost. Again, with today's equivalent, this would be between 865 million and 1.3 billion lives, or nearly 1/6 of the world's population. Beyond these grim statistics are the countless stories lost. To quote an African proverb, "When an old man dies, a library burns to the ground." On Memorial Day, we are reminded that it is the duty of the current generation to discover and share these stories so that they will not be forgotten. Amidst the emotional extremes of wartime, pulling thought and mind beyond the conceivable, composers and poets stewarded history through capturing common feelings, themes, and inner experiences through music and words. The impact of war on music was, at times, entirely practical. For instance, the Lord Nelson Mass by Franz Joseph Haydn was written during the Napoleonic Wars. A reduced orchestration was required due to both financial reductions and limited performer availability, as many Austrians served on the front lines. The original title of this Mass was a mass for times of distress. It became known by the public as the Lord Nelson Mass through hearsay, as it would premiere just over a month following British Admiral Horatio Nelson's defeat of Napoleon's fleet at the Battle of the Nile. Moving forward to the 20th century, one of the most iconic works premiered in France on the eve of the First World War, Stravinsky's ballet The Rite of Spring, was received in a unique manner, as described by author Carl von Vechten, who was present during one of the initial performances. He remarked that the possible tensions of war were cause for a more volatile reception, even despite the unconventional harmonies and rhythms of the time. His recollection includes a note that someone sitting behind him began to beat rhythmically on the top of his head with fists, and that the performance left the audience in an unsettled state. Music surrounding the Second World War speaks to the range of emotions, from conflict to loss to healing. Maurice Duruflé's Prelude and Fugue on the name Hélène was written as a tribute to fallen friend and colleague Jean Hélène, who served in the French army and was killed in 1940. Prior to the war, Hélène was an accomplished organist and composer, with over 125 opuses, despite his untimely death at the age of 39. British composer Ralph Williams experienced both world wars, living between 1872 and 1958. His Fifth Symphony, composed in 1943, drew the attention of English music critic Sir Neville Cardus, who remarked that the work contained the most benedictory and consoling music of the time. The overarching soundscape was not so much a reflection of the present conflict, but a much-needed respite, one of hope and calm amidst war. As part of preparing this feature, I had the opportunity to listen to stories from the Pacific and European theaters of the Second World War. It is impossible to capture the fullness of stories and conversations shared. Our first guest is Diane Harrison, mother of our executive director Sarah. Diane was a young child in England at the onset of the Second World War. Her story is reflective of war seen through a child's eyes.
I was 5 years old. My brother was 14. We lived about 7 or 8 miles from the centre of London in a place called Roehampton. I had started school that year. Children started school at 4 years old in those days. This particular day, it was a Sunday, and my grandparents had come over for the weekend. And we were waiting for things to happen, but we didn't know exactly what we were waiting for. My mother, of course, was making tea, and the first thing that came on was the Prime Minister, Anthony Eden, was telling us that war had been announced between us and Germany. I said to my mother, "Do you think we're going to die, Mummy?" And she said, "How do I know?" So I said to my father, would we be invaded by the soldiers that you fought in World War I? And he said, "No, ducky," that was a word they taught. "No, ducky," he said, "it would be their children." I didn't like that at all. German children are going to invade us, so that made me sit and think for a while. So then I said to my mother, "How will we know that we're being invaded?" And she said, "You will hear them marching down Dover House Road, you'll hear their boots." When a bomb was expected, a siren would go off, very, very loud, which would fill the whole area. with noise. And so we were always listening out for that, but there was no siren. And we sat there quite quietly when out of the blue there was this tremendous explosion. All the lights went out. The window was blown in. It had a blackout curtain in front of it, but the whole window was blown in. The door came off and fell up the stairs. I mean, all the plaster came down from the ceiling. You couldn't see a thing. The poor little bird was behind the curtain in the window, but he didn't seem fazed at all. He was still tweeting and singing. And my brother picked him up and he shook the glass out of the cage, and the little bird looked all right. He didn't look any the worse for wear. But my father was still outside fighting the incendiary bombs, and he didn't come back for a while. When he did, he had great difficulty because the front door had gone up the stairs, and he came in and he looked very white. And he said that we've got a hit here, and there are many casualties in the road. And he said, I'm sorry to tell you that Mary next door, who was fighting the bombs with I, she's dead. She was hit by a piece of shrapnel and killed instantly. This was a great shock to us all. One thing that it did do for me and for many people when I talked to older people and what it was like when they were the same age as I, we learned to be extremely frugal. We never wasted anything, and that through my life has always been something that stuck in my mind. Even now, I just can't waste anything. I can't waste food. Everything is used. And I don't know why I do it. It's just there. I do have regrets at not having a proper education. And I'm not the only one. I've spoken to other people at my age, English people, that they didn't ever get the education that they needed. They were so far behind when the war ended. We couldn't pick up. And so it was up to us to find out what we were going to do with our lives. I would say that things that are happening now in this world are much worse than it was when I was a child. There's much more death and destruction around, and wars are not fought by gentlemen. Well, they were years and years ago. That stopped during the First World War. Anything goes, doesn't matter what they think. If they want to gas them, if they want to poison them, they will do it. I feel terrible for young children growing up in war-torn countries today. I don't know how they manage. I do not know how they manage. And what will become of them, I don't know. They haven't got the opportunities that even I had. And they will just go through life, and their lives may be cut short. And I think it's just very, very sad indeed that the world has come in 2021, that the world is in this state that it is now. We always thought, as everyone does, things will get better. But unfortunately, that isn't always true.
Our second guest is my father, Roy Imperio. While he was not alive during the Second World War, his mother, a native Filipino, was a teenager during the Japanese occupation of the Philippines. Conversations around the struggles of war were not commonplace in my father's family, though over time he has been able to gather surrounding stories and experience some of the remnant trauma as part of home life.
She's in school first, and the teachers say, the teachers were crying, so the students, I think she was like in her teens, or maybe it's high school. Anyway, the teacher was telling everybody has to go home, and then go home in the middle of the day, middle of the school day, and because the Japanese are coming. And so they went home, and of course I think the parents knew ahead of time, the war's starting or whatever. Not until this day, which my mother told us, she remembered it very well. And it seems like a very traumatic day because everybody said the Japanese are coming, go home and, stay home and just be with your families. How do you know the Japanese are coming or there's some soldiers coming this way? They said, the Filipinos, they love to tell news. So they would know, somebody will tell, the Japanese are coming, so let's run for our lives. My cousin said that because if they hear that some soldiers are coming, either Japanese or Filipinos or whatever, on the way where they are, so because my mother and my aunt, they're supposed to be beautiful, whatever, and very fair and whatever, so they put charcoal in their faces and dress them up like little boys. And growing up in our house in Bagong Barrio, in every part of the house there was this, you say trash bags. I don't think it's trash bags, but it's made of cloth. I think it's like a burlap bag, maybe from the rice or whatever, saved, once you use the rice. So she was putting stuff in there. I don't even know what's in there. Maybe clothes. And then when we I hate to say the word reprimand her, it's like, what are those bags for? Or maybe I heard from my father or whatever. I said, what is that? We need to get rid of those stuff. No, she was so mad because just in case, we have to run and evacuate. I'm ready. Like that. So it's always this kind of running for your life fear. That's probably ingrained in them, that took them, sometimes brought them paranoia in the later years of their life. So everything you have to be extra careful. Don't trust the Japanese. They have this kind of after the war, I hate to say the word hate or something like that, but because the Japanese really did, the soldiers commanded to do. But there was a story that usually the mean soldiers during the Japanese war in the Philippines were not the Japanese, it was the Koreans that they hired. So, but of course it's under Japan, so the Filipinos have this thing about Japanese. Although I have so many Japanese friends when I was in school in Michigan, and they're the nicest people. Music was used, even you're in a camp or as a prisoner, you could still use music and uplift your spirits and make you survive, actually, the horrors of war.
On Memorial Day, we are reminded of our duty to honor those who paid the ultimate price so that it would not be required of us. To those who marched boldly into perilous fight, we thank you. To those whose courage exceeded the rocket's red glare and the bombs bursting in air, we thank you. To those who, through paying the ultimate sacrifice, gave us the land of the free and the home of the brave, we forever thank you. In honor of the fallen, the lost but not forgotten, we close with the words of Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Sleep, comrades, sleep and rest on this field of the grounded arms, where foes no more molest, nor sentries shot alarms. Ye have slept on the ground before, and started to your feet at the cannon's sudden roar, or the drum's redoubling beat. But in this camp of death, no sound your slumber breaks. Here is no fevered breath, no wound that bleeds and aches. All is repose and peace, untrampled lies the sod. The shouts of battle cease, it is the truce of God. Rest, comrades, rest and sleep. The thoughts of men shall be as sentinels to keep your rest from danger free. Your silent tents of green we deck with fragrant flowers. Yours has the suffering been, the memory shall be ours.